Hey, good evening and welcome to another episode of Under the Brush, where we're going to sit here, we're going to go through some painting, and we're going to make a nice painted fig, and then once we've got it all painted, then we're going to make a nice happy fig, because a painted fig is a happy fig. Hey, good evening and welcome to tonight's episode of Under the Brush. Tonight we're going to be looking at painting Ulrich the Slayer for the Space Wolves army for Warhammer 40,000, and we're going to be going over some of the basics. Now, at this point, we're going to be taking a look at painting the army as a whole, the model as a whole. We're going to be fitting him into the paint scheme I've already established for my army. It's not a standard Space Wolves color scheme. It's more of a black and tan type of color scheme. So we're going to have some differences with Space Wolves, obviously, and we're going to be taking a look at how to achieve some of the nice sense of depth to the color for some of the areas, and how we go about getting some of those layers and those effects going. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Alright, so we're going to take a look, first off, selection of brushes. We've got a dry brush, pretty typical of what you can expect from a dry brush. Got a larger brush, allows me to paint some of the larger details, larger surface areas. Then I've got a selection of detail brushes. One very tiny detail brush right here. I don't think you can even see the hairs on it. Got another one, a little less detail, and a couple of larger brushes for more of a blocking in area. Alright, so we're going to start off with some base coating. Now, looking at Ulrich here, one of the things that we notice, I've already assembled a model, which is actually a one-piece model with the backpack on it. I have primed it, the gray color, and then I've base coated it with a black. The primary color for the armor is black. There will be bone areas, various areas that we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at the skull, right shoulder, the tip of the plasma pistol, and some detail areas that as we go along we'll be able to see them more, some skulls. The belt will actually be gold with a white and bone wings. On the back, we're going to be looking at the vented armor plate on the back of the backpack is going to be bone. The wolf skulls are going to end up gold. The wolf pelt will be, I've decided to go with a gray pattern on this one. On Ulrich rather than some of the browns that I've done on others. And the same thing, I'm going to use the same gray pattern with the wolf tail talisman he's got. The edging of the armor, I'm going to go with metallic silver. There's going to be some other detailing, and we'll take a look at those developments as we go ahead. The Crozius Arcanum, the weapon head, is going to be gold. There is a wolf skull and a couple of rings of skulls as well. Those are going to end up being bone. So generally that's what we're looking at for the color scheme. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab some paints. We're going to start off with the base coating for the bone, and then we're going to do the base coating for the metallics. All the gold and silver metals are all going to be initially base coated with a bolt gun metal to give a nice metallic undercoat for everything. Then we're going to go ahead and paint the gold areas with gold, and then the silver areas are going to end up getting a silver highlighting. So we're going to start off with bone. I'm using snakebite leather, and this is one of the older bottles from Citadel's paint line. Pretty much a relatively light tan kind of color. You can see the color scheme there, get a sense of what the color is, and as we go ahead and start painting, you'll be able to actually see what the color ends up like. Alright. So this brush here actually is a 000 size, and I got this one at I think it was like Michael's or something, some craft shop, art supply store. Alright. Now, one of the things I'm doing is trying to be careful. This piece on the backpack that I'm going at now, I'm painting now, there are vent holes along it, and I'm going to try to make sure I avoid filling those in, because then I'd have to go back in and fill those in with black to make them stand out again. One of the really fantastic things about painting is when you really get into it, what really separates really high-end painting from just real good tabletop painting is details. Little details like filling in the what happens when you fill in the holes, and then you have to go ahead and get some black back in there to make them stand out again. Kind of lose a little bit of detailing. So like the real high-end painting, you generally will avoid getting into that type of problem when you're focusing on trying to be competitive painting. And I try to get a nice even coverage. It doesn't have to be perfect with the initial coverage, because this is kind of an undercoat color, which is going to be covered up when we actually get into the paint scheme proper for the army. Alright. Now, one of the interesting things, and let's see if we can get this to show it. Ulrich's plasma pistol, unlike a lot of the new models, there is no separation between the band and the tip, so we're going to go ahead and paint that whole stretch as the bone color. So that's going to end up quite a bit more bone than most of my plasma pistols. Again, one of the things I'm going to work on avoiding is filling in the vent holes for the plasma. Okay, yeah, still getting used to the making sure the placement for the camera angle is right. One of the things I've found is keeping your bristles wet as you're painting, even if you're not really thinning it out, just keeps the paint from clogging them up a little bit too much. One of the things I've found, and I remember I was talking to a friend of mine some months ago when he was watching me paint, and he commented to the effect that one of the things he was always amazed by was how precise I was with painting and putting the paint exactly where I wanted it, kind of type of thing. And that's one of the things, like I said, it's something that I've always tried to work on, is getting the paint right where I wanted it, because that means I have less to clean up later on when I'm putting finishing touches on the model. I don't have as much that I have to go back and touch up. Alright, so there we have the tip of the plasma gun done, and so we're going to continue with the bone areas, all the bones, the skulls, wings, that type of stuff. We're going to keep working on those. Now I'm going to go ahead and get in here. So, next thing, now that we've got the skull done, we're going to take a look at his wolf skull talisman, his wolf skull, and then we will start working on the wolf tail talisman. The wolf tooth necklace. Yeah. Alright. And things I find works when you're filling in a area that has some texture, like the wolf skull helmet that he has, is to come at it in brush strokes in a couple of different directions. Really helps to make sure that you get a decent smooth coverage area. So that you fill in the area properly in a nice smooth covering. And I'm going to be careful, and I'm going to avoid filling in his eyes at this point. Keep the eye sockets open. I will think about what I'm going to try and do with the eyes at some point as I'm painting this. I'm going to be considering if I want to leave them kind of the black hollow look, or if I want to go ahead and give them a color, like maybe a blue or a red type of thing. We'll see how it goes from there. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and just give even the teeth on his wolf tail talisman a nice smooth cover of the leather brown. We can darken that up and give them some details, and then paint the teeth later on and bring those teeth, the color back up, and get it nice and deep in the recesses between the teeth, and then lighten them up through where the teeth are. Get a good strong contrast between the white for the teeth and the dark area between them. Okay, so let's see. Next, I'm going to start working on his necklace. He's got a couple of wolf skulls right here. One on each side, the ends of the necklace. Again, I'm working and I'm trying not to fill in the eye sockets and little details like the nose, while still at the same time making sure I get the basically the cheekbone, the occipital bone, which is the bone right under the eye. So we try and make sure we get that without becoming overwhelming. Now, he's also got a couple of wolf teeth here on the necklace. And then he has one skull right in the middle. And this one, unfortunately, is probably going to be getting filled in on the eyes and stuff, but worry about that later, and we can fill that in with a wash. Or if you really need to, we can take a really fine detail brush, which is like that one that I've got. It's decent for that. Alright. So next up for the bone color, I'm going to go with the, I'm going to hold off on the belt because actually the belt is going to be metallic underneath it. So I'll take care of that in a bit. I'm looking around, looking for other skulls hidden here and there. He has a purity seal stuck to the outside, pinned into the fur. Not sure if it's supposed to be a wax seal holding it into the fur or not, but regardless, he has a purity seal here. Alright, so there's a purity seal. Try to make sure the color's nice and even. Okay. So that's pretty much it for the bones, other than the belt on the body. Now that leaves the weapon. There's a wolf skull on the weapon. There is a series of skulls here and here that are really, really tiny. So those ones we're gonna look at using a couple of techniques to cheat, kind of get the effect. Next up, so we're going with the wolf skulls on his now Power Maul. Rosarius. Crozius Arcanum. Rosarius is the little term, little thing here. So we're going along. Nice smooth color. All right. Now, one of the things I'm going to do when I'm painting the two bands of skulls on the handle, I've knocked a little bit of extra paint off, so it's not entirely full and wet. I'm just going to kind of go along. Not really dry brushing because the paint's still wet, but it's not really loaded up on the brush, so it's not really getting deep into the details here. So it's leaving a lot of the details, but it's getting the effect of the skulls coming up. So you can kind of see that these are supposed to be skulls. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the model. Look it all over. See if there are any little skulls that I've missed. And one of the things you'll be noticing is I tend to move the model around a lot, especially where I'm doing this filming. One of the things I want to make sure is keeping the model right where you can see it in the camera. Also, it's a fairly good lighting for the most part. Some of these areas that I'm working on, right up behind the backpack, it's a little difficult to see because the backpack's creating some shadow. But all in all, we move along pretty well here. Alright, so backpack, the backpack's still creating some interference, but the left shoulder pad is pretty well coated now. It's gonna need need another coat in a moment, but I can now come back to the knee pad and fill that in. Give that a second covering, and that should take care of that and give it a nice even coat everywhere. Alright, there we go. And now let's take a look at the backpack again. Alright, so we got that base coating done. So all the tan areas are going to end up being a nice bone color. I'm going to be using Ushtabi bone. This is actually the first time I'm using it. I've been using the bleached bone, but the bottle I've got of that is just about empty, and it's really been thinned down several times and quite thin right now. So we've got that. So we've got the nice look there. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the belt right in here. I'm going to hit that with a metallic, and after I do that, I'm going to go ahead and paint the wings and skull on the belt with the tan, the nice leather color. Get that as a base coat, and so let's go ahead with that. Now, sticking with the Citadel colors, I'm going with bolt gun metal. It's a nice, fairly deep, dark metal color. It's kind of like the good base coat for metals. And once again, we see why Citadel's switched paint pots. So looking at it, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and get that built. I'm going to go ahead and give him a nice gold belt, as I figure, like the WWE, or yeah, WWE now, he needs a nice shiny gold belt. After all, he is the Ulrich the Slayer. He is like the priest for the Space Wolves. Which means for my homebrew chapter, he is quite the legendary model. So we're going to keep working with this now. Now that we're going with the metallics. Yeah. There's a reason those paint pots weren't very popular. Alright, so there's some other areas that are being metallics. He has some raised ridges along the edges of his armor and some strips as well, so I'm going to go ahead and get those now. And as before, being nice and careful, real specific where the placement's going. Now, one of the things I'm going to try to do as I'm doing this is not put the paintbrush with silver paint in it into the water. A lot of people are really fussy about doing that, but I found as long as you don't get too much silver paint, metallic paint into the water that you're brushing with, it's not too bad. And if you're going with a color, it generally overwhelms any metallic flecks that are in there. If you're going with black, that's a little different. Alright, I just noticed he's got a little skull up here, so what I'm going to do is, rather than worrying about trying to get it bone, I'm going to end up doing that one as gold, since it's part of the edging for his armor. Now, metallics, you need to really keep the brush wet. They tend to dry and become very sticky very quickly. Okay. Along, we're trying to get some of the nice areas, kind of fill them in. Reminds me of times when we were doing some other stuff. And so just kind of slowly trying to fill in the areas, get a nice block in on the color, kind of like define what the major, not just colors, but effects for the army, for the model is going to be. So you've got areas where you're going to have the bone. I'm starting to get those blocked in. Now I'm getting the metallic areas defined. Start really getting a good feel for the model and what the model is going to look like at the end. Even though I'm going to end up with a lot of the stuff that's silver metal right now, I'm still going in with just the silver. A lot of it's going to be ending up gold. Still, start getting a feel for what it's going to be like, and getting a sense of what this guy is going to really look like on the table, and really get that nice feel for what is supposed to be one of the major characters for the army. Well, looking around, looking to spot other things. Yeah, so we're trying to really define areas, and right now we're just going with more of the generic areas, trying to define what the effects are going to be, rather than worrying about some of the smaller details. Like for right now, I'm not going to be worrying about painting the inside of the arm or the armpit, the inside of the elbow, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to worry about right now. Looking it over, other things like some detailing on the plasma pistol, I'm not going to get right now. I'll do that when I'm working on details. We got a hand grenade right here. So it's large enough of an area that it's not really just detailing. So I'm going to go ahead and get that one. So looking at it. So looking it over now, so most of it's done. Most of that's done. And the only thing left, looking at it, I've got the some treads. We'll get some of those details. Got that pretty well. I think I'm going to go ahead and put this. And like as I'm going along, I'm still looking it over, trying to decide some of the details. Like this circular area on the backpack, I hadn't really looked at it too closely. Figure I'm going to go ahead and paint that. I'm probably going to be keeping that silver because the gold. I'm planning on painting the wolf skulls as a gold. So looking it over, about the only thing left now is the head of his Crozius, his weapon of office. Go ahead and paint that in metallic. When we come back to block it in, we're going to be painting that in gold as well. So looks like we've got the metallics pretty much done now. So I'm going to look it over and decide what do I want to go with next, because realistically still have a few things to work on before we get into the next layer of colors. Probably what I'll do is go back and having looked over the model and seen a few details before that I hadn't really thought about too much before. I can go ahead and get those done now. One of which is going to be the belt. Now I'm going to use a smaller brush for this one. So this one is by American Painter. It's a 10-0. It's a pretty detailed brush. Get it wet. So you can see the tip on it's pretty small. Again, this one's a synthetic blend, so you get a little bit of hook on the end, which is actually sticking with the whole idea of still looking over the model, trying to decide where things are going to be. I'm going to go ahead and give the bits here around. I think this is supposed to be his basically his Rosarius, the badge of office that indicates he is the favorite of the Emperor, the wolf priest that is responsible for the spiritual guidance of the chapter. Get over. Alright. So I'm looking to see if there's any other details I want to go with. Alright. I think that's good. So now I'm going to go back to the brown leather, to go with the belt, and I decided I'm going to go with the gun holster here. I'm going to go with that as well, and a couple of pouches on the side. I'm not as worried about getting up onto the fur with the brown, because what happens is I'm going to be painting that a nice gray color, so the undercoat on that's going to be all black, so it's really going to get a good nice definition, going to get a good line for separation, defining the different areas. So looking at it, got a couple bits here where the leather is kind of flapped over. So one of the things I want to do is be very careful and try to leave just a hint of a thin black line between the holster and the leather. That way it kind of gets a visually defines the boundaries between those two surfaces. Because if there's not even a hint of a break, then your eyes kind of pick up on that, and it stands out as one of those things that's just wrong. Funny, at work, I was talking with my boss a little while ago, and we were talking about sending out emails, always making sure that spelling is always right, because if the spelling is wrong, people fixate on that. So if, even though you're talking about how great something's going, project's going really well, but if you spell project wrong, people fixate on the fact that you spelled the word wrong, rather than the fact that the project's ahead of schedule and under budget. And it's just one of those things. Alright. Now I'm trying to make sure there's a nice smooth color coat, because this is going to be pretty much the color that it's going to end up. I'm not going to be covering it with a tan or anything like I am going to do with all the bone area. I'm not going to do anything, any other colors. Do just some highlighting and shading from here. Okay, so looking it over, I'm looking to see if there's any other areas I'm going to end up painting either leather or bone. Alright, so looking it over, I think we're all good there. Now I'm going to go ahead and lay out the areas that are going to be ending up gold. And what I'm going to go ahead and do now is do a wash on the areas that are end up gold. So that the head of the Crozius, the two wolf skulls, the two wolf heads on the backpack, the belt, and the grenade. We'll go ahead and paint those, give those all a flesh wash, and it's kind of an orangey brown kind of color. Oh, let's see, where did I put that? Alright. This is about as good as gold right here. This, one of the old pots of paint. Again, I'm using the relatively small brush because I want to be very careful on where I put it. There's always something to behold. Okay, so getting a pretty good definition there. Kind of a nice orangey red, orangey brown, bit of a red color to it. Okay. There we go. Started to slide out of the picture. Okay. Let's see, make sure I get it in the... Okay. Alright. So I got that. Now while I'm letting that ink dry, that wash, I'm going to go ahead and bust out the bone and start looking it over and start trying to decide where to go. So I'll probably start with the plasma pistol, the skull head, skull on the shoulder pad, the helmet, knee pad. Give this some time in the backpack time to dry. Okay. So, now for the bone color, I'm using, this is a brand new pot. It's Ushtabi bone, and we'll see how that ends up. There we go. Alright, so like I said, Ushtabi bone, Citadel's, it's the new line that they've got. So we'll bust it open. There we go. Brand new pot. Alright. Okay. So, like I said, we're going to start with the plasma pistol. Now, I'm sticking with the small brush because I want to just stick to the area that's already been defined by the snakebite leather paint. Okay, that's something stuck to my thumb there. Okay, so like I said, I'm just going in and trying like to find the edges of where everything's going to be. Then I can go back and paint everything in a little bit more. So again, being careful not to fill in the vent holes for the plasma pistol, because especially with the Yoshitabe bone, it'd be a real pain in the butt having to go in and refill those with black to get that nice definition again. Alright. Okay. So now get the top of the pistol. Okay. Smooth color. Again, working to trying to make sure I keep the paint, the actual brush itself wet. Keeps the paint from drying out a little bit too quick. Keeps the paint flowing smoothly. Keeps the brush from getting ruined actually over time, because you start getting paint stuck in the brush. It gets up into the fair rule. If it actually dries there, you start having some more problems with the brush. It doesn't work quite so well, and eventually ends up not so good. So now moving on from the pistol, we're going on to the and as I'm going through, working to make sure I don't fill in the eyes, and yet I want to make sure I get the bone, that nice bit of bone right around it. Kind of get a good definition on where the eye is supposed to be, and kind of go over the surface of the skull. Again, one of the real characteristics of the wolf skulls is the hole for the nose. So working to make sure that it stays clear, so you got that nice defining visual characteristic. All right. Okay, so we got the right eye set. We're slowly working up, kind of where the ears are. We don't want those quite as well defined as the eyes. Alright. Now looking it over, the coloration's a little uneven, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of give it a nice thin down over the surface of the skull, so we get a little bit more of an even color to it. After this, we'll be giving it a quick wash with the brown color, kind of tone it down a bit, and then we're going to go and give it a highlighting again, kind of bring the color back up. Alright, so now I've moved on to his wolf helm. And again, what I'm working on is coming from behind the eye and just bringing the brush over, not filling it in, so that we've got a nice amount of depth and detail, and it leaves a good clear line around the ridge on the top of the eye. I'm going to come in, get under the eye, the ridge there, slowly work towards there. So what I was able to do was pull the brush across so it doesn't get in, come underneath and define the bottom, the kind of the cheekbone, occipital bone under the eye, so get a real good definition there. And then towards the corner of the eye, just kind of gently place it in, but not too deep. Make sure I'm contact with the hand these fingers touching the model so that if there's shaking, everything shakes together. And then just kind of pull that across. Alright. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue painting the model, the helmet. Alright. Now I'm not particularly worried about right around the jaw, right around the teeth, because when we go back in, I do a wash. I'm going to make sure I get a good amount of wash up in there to really bring out the defining, get a good defining of the teeth. Make sure that the separation is really well right in there. And then I'll go ahead and hit the teeth with a white. Give them a real nice pop look, while keeping the rest of the skull bone. So really make sure that the teeth stand right out. Come along, do the bottom of the jaw. So quickly bring it across, see where all the detailing is. And come in and go ahead and get those details. Alright, now looking at it, there's you can maybe see it. There's a ridge along there's a line of, not really sure if they're supposed to be rivets or spikes or dimples or something, but there's little points along the top of the helmet. And if you look, you might be able to pick out that as I've been pulling the brush straight forward, there's a little bit of a line that's been defined there. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that kind of gets filled in so that we don't have that quite blatant straight line kind of effect. Now I'm going to come in and doing the left side, I'm going to do a lot of the same stuff I just did. Obviously as a right-handed model painter, I'm going to have to do things a little bit differently, but I'm doing a lot of the same type of approach. I try to come from the back of the helmet and just pull it forward, which gives me a nice definition for the top of the eye socket. Just a little bit of touch of paint with a wet brush still. Come underneath, define that eye bone along the bottom, and now fill it in right here. Kind of get that in there. So now we've got that filled in. So now we've got that, and now we can go and get the helmet under the eye. Okay. All right. And then we're gonna from there we're gonna work on the Crozius and then the backpack. Again, one of the nice things, I'm trying to keep it nice, smooth, thin coats rather than trying to get a full coat, because building lighter colors on top of dark, you really, especially with some of the real light colors like the bones or white, or red, yellow, they're not very dense in color, so you really don't want to try to paint a full-on layer because sometimes it doesn't work. And you end up getting real thick, obvious brush strokes, like physical, kind of like an impressionist paint style. And that's just not what you want on figs and models. So again, working on the Crozius, defining the eye socket, and then working down from there. We'll be working now defining the nose. Give that nice good visual definition. And so go ahead and get the surface of the skull. Fairly smooth coverage. Now we're going to do the other side of the skull. Slowly work around the eye there. Alright. Now I'm going to fill this in because try to keep it looking so that it doesn't look like he's got a four-eyed skull or anything. to get a nice, much more defined area. Alright. So that's that one. Now there's the one on the back. And once again, go ahead and define the eye sockets. Alright. So that's good. Now we're going to go with the left shoulder pad. Now I want to be careful about using the paint that's a little too thin. So I want to try to make sure that it stays a little, the paint job stays a little thin along the edges of the thing, because yeah, you can see it here. Maybe not be able to see it on the thing, but the paint's kind of pulled to the edge of the armor and kind of ended up a little thicker than I wanted, right at the very edge, right up against the ridge of the armor. So I'm going ahead and trying to pull it out a bit so that it's not as the opacity, the coverage is not as dense, and so you get that bit of a brown under it showing up, which is kind of what I wanted to aim for. Alright, now we do the upper area of the shoulder pad. Okay. Again, right now, because I was using a nice thin down paint, is a little coverage is not as dense as I'd like, but we'll take care of that in a minute. All right, so now we're gonna go with the backpack. Go very carefully around these holes. Just kind of leave some paint and slowly work the brush so that the brush is barely touching the model. Because if it's just barely touching the model, the brush hairs won't actually push into the holes. And it will be less likely that the paint will actually get down into those holes that way. And I'm being careful to keep just a little bit of paint, not a whole lot, because some very small areas that we're painting. We don't need much paint right here. Alright. So, let's see, just get right along this edge. There we go. Alright, so we've got that area pretty well defined. Nice definition on those holes. So now we can go ahead and paint the top of the backpack there. Alright. A little bit quicker brush strokes. You don't have to worry about the filling in the holes or anything. We just want to get a nice bit of coverage. So that. Alright, so looking at it, now we got to go back and I'm going to go through and look things over. Like the knee pad, the left shoulder pad, the backpack's going to need another little bit of paint just to get a good smooth coverage, because if you can kind of see it here, the knee pad really, it's tan, but the coloration on it's not very smooth, it's not very well defined as tan. The brown underneath it is still showing through a lot. So we're going to go through and just add another layer, and I'm keeping the brush fairly well thinned down because we've already got one layer on. We don't really need a whole lot of paint to get a smooth coverage. Alright, there we go. Okay. That looks good there. Now I'm going to put another layer onto the shoulder pad. Kind of smooth it out. You can't really, probably can't really see it too well because it's up and under the backpack and light's not necessarily letting you get in there. But there's a lot of the brown under showing through from under the bone, and what we got is kind of streakiness. Kind of see some of the brush strokes showing through. So we take some paint, put it on a brush, nice and wet, a little on the thin side. And now one of the things we want to do is try and do brush strokes across previous brush strokes. So the previous brush strokes were all up and down along the shoulder pad, so now I'm going to try to get some paint on there and then do brush strokes side to side. Now this area, because what happens is you kind of get one set of brush strokes like this, you get faint lines showing up, you do another one like this, and now you don't have the faint lines showing up nearly as much. You end up with a far better coverage that way. Alright, so let's see, we've got this area up here right at the very edge of the top area of the right. Okay, there's the purity seals. Next up, we're going to go with the skulls on the handle. Now, dry the brush out. This is a little bit of a difference here. So, wash it off, clean it. Now, this has to be fairly quick so that the paint doesn't really fully dry out on the brush. Okay, so taking some of the paint, just a little bit of color on it, not a whole lot. Kind of tap it on my palette so that it's not entirely wet and loose, and just kind of bring it across these skulls. Not really dry brushing because the paint's still actually wet, but also doing it so that the bristles of the brush lay flat across the surface so that they're not actually getting into the details of the model there. Alright. So we're getting a little bit more here. So what we're trying to do is give it a nice bit of color across the top, and that way we can define the band of skulls as skulls and keep some of the detail visible. So you can see like the eyes and nose holes, that type of stuff. Alright, so now we're going to do the next one. I washed my brush between them so that the paint on the brush doesn't dry out completely and really stick to the brush, kind of ruining it. Alright, now I'm going to be a little sloppy on this because I can come back with black and paint in around the bands, up to the edges of the bands, and not have to worry about being quite so precise and careful with them. Alright, there's that. Now last up, looking at it. Alright, got skulls on the back of his knuckles. Go with those, pretty much same kind of thing. Just gonna go ahead and run some color and really just get in the tops of the surfaces. Not quite enough paint there. Alright. I'm running so the brushes are laying very close to flat along the surfaces. Alright. Now I'm going to come in, holding the model so that both hands are touching it, both hands are touching each other. I am going to just touch the skulls with the bit of bone. kind of getting the head part of the skull kind of up above the eyes, get that redefined a little bit more, where that is. And I'm just gonna come across here quick with the brush very close to flat, kind of bring some of the detailing up where the eyes and nose holes are. Wash my brush out again. Alright, so making sure paint dried out a little bit more than I would have liked. So I'm just kind of giving it a little bit more of a wash action. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do something a little bit more drastic in a moment. So, next up, pretty much same process here. Run the brush pretty well close to parallel. Get just a touch of paint coming from the back, basically the back of the skulls. Just bring them forward, then run it across the brush parallel. So we're getting definition of the skulls there. Alright. And last thing I'm going to do, put another layer up on the backpack. It looks like the area around the holes, the vent holes there, is fairly well defined, so I'm just going to get some more up on the top surface, this area, and the and on the little bit of a post. So I'll get a little bit of paint. Alright, so bones mostly done. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the next big color on it is going to be the gold. So we've done the flesh wash on all the metallics that I'm going to end up painting gold. There may be a couple other details I decide to go with gold on, like maybe the pommel on the handle. But for the most part, what we're looking at with the gold is going to be the belt, the grenade, the two wolf heads, and the actual weapon part of the Crozius. So looking at that, we're going to go ahead and close up the bone, take out the gold, give it a good shake. Alright, and I'm going to keep using this brush. I've actually I've been using it for a couple models now, and really I'm liking it and hoping I'll be able to get more of these as this one starts to wear out, because all brushes wear out. So I'm going to start with the belt. And just going to go in and get the belt area. Little spot right between the tops of the wings above the skull. Continue with the belt down the side. Look in here. Make sure I get that gold right up in there. And take this right along the bottom edge under the wing. Careful not to get the ring. Make sure that's on both sides. Alright. So now we're going to go with the grenade. Now, the grenade's a pineapple style grenade, so it's got that nice texture to it, which really kind of stands out, and people really recognize that as, oh, that's a grenade. So I'm going to be real careful about it and just try to get those points. And just kind of slowly, basically just put dots of gold on that grenade where the high points of the effect is. Hit the top, this flat round area, and looking at the bottom, another one right on the bottom. Okay, Okay, so 2 gold areas down. Next up, looking at it. Oh yeah, sorry, forgot. The little skulls at the top. He has the ridges around the side of his arm, or the edges of his armor. He's got a strip that goes down the front of the thigh, and the front of the shin. At the top of the thigh piece, there's a skull on both of them. So I was going to go with gold on that. I forgot to hit them with a flesh wash, but they're small enough that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Should be able to still get enough of the good gold color in there to really define it as golden skull. Alright. So we got that done. I'm going to go with the wolf skulls. I keep saying wolf skulls. It's the wolf heads on the backpack. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just kind of looking it over, looking at where the surfaces are. And I'll do the same thing when I get to the Crozius. I'm looking at and just come in and give it some gold. Really define it as gold rather than some kind of a color effect on a silver. Alright. So we're getting that. Looking at it, I want to make sure it's clearly gold in there. Okay. Alright, so next up, getting that. Get the bottom jaw on the front side there. So, looking it over, looks fairly good. Little details here, I want to make sure that's gold. Gold. Alright. Next up, now we're going to do the right side. Pretty much same process. Just go right in, bring some gold over it. Get a nice color of the gold. Kind of see the difference there as I'm bringing it in. Kind of have a dull, dark kind of color. The bit of a yellow tint to it, and now we're going ahead and making it what is supposed to be clearly a golden color. And getting those areas. See about working in and around these whisker holes. Alright. Across the top of the head. And remember, keep the brush moist. Alright. I'm looking at it, making sure there's a good solid gold coloration. Now, this side I can get into a little bit better, even though it's a whole lot tighter because of the right shoulder pad. But I can still get in there. Actually get in there a little bit easier and control where the brush is and what it's doing. Alright. Hey there. Okay. Alright, so now I'm moving in and around the little whisker holes. Alright. Got that fairly well. Yeah. Alright, okay. Slight distraction there. Alright, so next, so what we're going to do now is continuing on with the skull. We're going to go ahead and get the bottom jaw on that side. Alright. Now, the front side pretty well done. Now we're going to take a look around, get the bottom of it. Alright. Okay. Now I'm just kind of looking it over, thinking I want to get those teeth a little bit more on both of them. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the Crozius. Basically, you're just going to go in and paint it gold. This one's going to be a little bit heavier than along the skulls because the ridges are much deeper, and so when we go to give it a nice shading, coloring, the deep ridges will hold the wash a little bit better. Alright, come across the top and down the front on this side. Go across here. Yeah, as one of the things I'll be looking at is making sure that the gold color gives a nice and even and smooth and consistent. So in a minute we'll be going back and getting the flat surfaces with a second coloring of gold, second layer, because what we're going to run into is streaking. For some reason, and I'm still, the only thing I can think of is that it's something to do with the ink and the gold. It really does not cover very well as far as getting a solid base coat, which is the reason I usually will go with a bulk on metal undercoating with a flesh wash and then gold over that. Alright, and just that bit right there. Okay, so now I'm going to look it over, see if there's any other areas that I wanted to paint gold. And yep, there's one. Did not hit with the flesh wash, but again, much like the skulls at the top of the thigh armor strips, it's not a large surface area. So flesh washing is probably not necessarily vital to really getting a good consistent color. Alright, so it is the bell part. Now one of the things I'm doing is being real slow and easy with these brush strokes because I want to leave the rim at the very bottom of the bell as a silver metal. And now that I just said that, I might have gone a little bit too much there. I'll know in a moment. Nope, didn't quite go too far. Okay, almost, but not quite. Alright, so now I'm looking it all over, see if there's any other areas I want to go with the gold on. Now, the next step is going to be to give the bone area a wash. Now, I'm going to use brown ink. Hey, let's see, there we go. Brown ink and scorched brown. And use those as kind of a mix and a whole bunch of water for them. So now I'm going to go with a little bit bigger brush again. get some water on my palette. So there's a fair amount of water because I want to really make sure it's real thin and only a little bit of coloring to the bone area. Oh, be that way. Alright. So, pick up the scorched brown. Alright. Next up, brown ink. Now, this gives it a bit of a different effect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get some of the surface area that's the bone surface areas, the skulls. Now, if I'm not comfortable with the some of the filling in, around the skulls, eyes, and stuff, I'll go ahead and make sure I get plenty of the wash in there, kind of darken it up a little bit in there so it's a little better defined. And as you can see now, the better view. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, as I bring it across, you should see the teeth defined a little bit better. A little bit better anyways. Get it there. Alright. Underneath. Let's move on that one. So what I'm doing is just kind of adding a little bit of color, getting a nice brown tone to it. Bit of depth to the shading of it. So now when I come back in a minute and repaint all of those brown with the bone, hit up the highlights, kind of make those stand out a bit more again. Alright. Okay. So just kind of getting a little bit more color to it, a little bit of a brownish tone. So just going through. I am not going to be messing around with the shoulder pad though. That's too tight of an area for me to really try to get some of these finer details. And visually, it's somewhat obscured by the model. The left arm being raised, backpack obscures it a little bit, so some of the subtle effects of the washing with the brown is not necessarily going to show up very well. So we're going to go ahead and skip that. Now the nice thing is with the brown, you can not worry so much, especially around the gold. You can really kind of brush it in. Even if you get it in on the gold, it really just kind of blends right in with gold. Actually acts like a wash on the gold as well, like maybe doing another flush wash kind of thing. Darkens it up quite a bit, which is okay because when I come back through with the polished gold from Vallejo's game color, it'll really allow me to make those areas stand out, the higher surface areas. Alright, so looking at it, pretty well set now. We're just going to let it sit for a minute while I contemplate what the next color is going to be, because we got to let that wash dry. Really going to sit here and look it over. Some of the things I'm going to be also thinking about is eventually I'm still trying to decide if I want to paint the Ulrich's eyes or not. The ribbing on the back of the plasma pistol. Trying to think about that, deciding if I want to do maybe OSL blue or something, but I think that's probably a little beyond the scope of what we're looking at tonight. So probably not get into that. Maybe on another model I'll do some plasma pistols for some Wolfguard.
Oh, doing more. Well, Unfortunately, that's pretty much all we have for Spectre Ames painting his Ulrich model. Uh, yeah, I'm just basically doing stuff that looks pretty good for our cameras. Spectre Ames does a really good quality job. I hope you basically liked the video. It's pretty much, the model was pretty much near its finishing state. He can talk a little bit more about his techniques on sealing and stuff like that. But that was a good example of how Spectre Ames paints a lot of his wonderful models that you've seen in a lot of our bat reps and stuff like that. And we hope more to come. But for you, to let us know how you enjoyed or didn't like certain parts of this video, comment below. If you did like a lot of the stuff, please thumbs up, make sure you like us, and share this with everybody else out there, because we want to expand what we do for Spectre Studios and get you guys interested in some of the stuff that we can basically do for you guys and entertain you. So I picked up a lot of painting tips for myself, so maybe I can get a little bit better, improving my quality, and I hope you did too. Thanks again. This is Spectre Sinensi and a Spectre Ames video for Under the Brush, and we'll see you again.